Alright, welcome to a lesson on using chords. So we're going to be talking about several properties that chords have in our circle. So let's get to it. So congruent corresponding chords theorem. That's a mouthful. In the same or congruent circles, two minor arcs are congruent if and only if their corresponding chords are congruent. So we no longer need to know a central arc. We no longer need to know a central angle to know if our arcs are congruent. So we can use our chords. So if we know that AB and chord CD are congruent, then we know that arc AB is congruent to arc CD. Please note this only works with minor arcs. The perpendicular bisector theorem. If a diameter of a circle is perpendicular to a chord, then the diameter bisects the chord and its arc. So we know AB is a diameter, and if it is perpendicular to chord XY, then we know that AB bisects chord XY, and it also bisects the arc formed by that chord, so arc XBY. The perpendicular chord bisector converse is the opposite of our theorem. It says that if we have one chord of a circle and its perpendicular bisector of another chord, then that first chord is a diameter. So it's a converse, so it's the opposite of our theorem. So here we just have two chords in our circle, and we notice that chord AB is congruent and bisects chord CD. Well, if AB is, it's not congruent, it's perpendicular. We see that if AB is perpendicular and bisects CD, then AB is a diameter. So if you see one chord that is a perpendicular bisector of another chord, that first chord is your diameter for your circle. And finally, we have the equidistant chords theorem. In the same or congruent circles, two chords are congruent if and only if they are equidistant from the center. So we have chord AB and chord CD, and they're congruent if and only if XP is congruent to WP. So the distance from the center P to the chord, if that is congruent, then the chords are congruent, which also means that their arcs would be congruent from our first theorem about corresponding congruent chords. So here are our theorems in the converse about chords.